Welcome back to the Crypto Clown World channel. This is the weekend podcast for the 4th of May, 2024. I'm your host with the honks, Jason Bruce, honking back in for you this weekend. And as always, I have my co-host here, Christopher Lundy. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm victorious as always, Jason. How are you?
Fantastic. Awesome. Welcome back, sir. Welcome back. I know we've
Thank
got
you.
a lot on the docket as always. I don't want to waste any time
Ugh.
for our
Yeah.
listeners or for yourself. But with that said, if you're joining us as usual, I would ask you to honk the like button if you've been enjoying the content previously. If you're not familiar with the channel, get subscribed and hit the bell for notifications. We'll bring you these podcasts every weekend going forward, along with other updates and fun stuff. So, again, with all that said, what do you have for us this weekend, Chris?
Well, top of the show, we got some good news in crypto land. Coinbase, through their Twitter X account, has announced that Coinbase International Exchange will add support for ARweave or Arweave, Hedera, and Theta perpetual futures on Coinbase International Exchange and Coinbase Advanced. It's got three different trading pairs for each. They're opening on or after 9:30 a.m. UTC, which is UK time, on May 9th, 2024, which is next week. Now, there's been constant screaming, whining, demanding, uh, you know, gesticulation and speculation as to when a US based exchange would start to hold Theta as an asset. Interestingly, there's no spot trading, just perpetuals. So if you want to trade futures on a centralized exchange such as Coinbase, then you can do it there now. It's not entirely clear to me who the intended audience is for this, but leverage is how they get you. So my thinking is that we're most likely going to start seeing more ETFs rather than less, and ETFs require perpetuals. They require futures because it's a leveraged financial instrument. So I would expect to see more real world asset ETFs come into play at some point, decentralized physical infrastructure asset ETFs as well. That seems to be the direction this is going in. Also, the SEC is looking to classify Ethereum as a security due to its move from proof of work to proof of stake. So, all the geniuses that thought that moving to proof of stake would be ideal for Ethereum's long term future, they may have to eat those words sooner rather than later, unfortunately. But that is also in play in the crypto markets. Going back to geopolitics, and go right back to the Middle East and the Levant, where we've pretty much been in terms of the news cycle since last year. Essentially, it's been dominating everything domestically and internationally. So, uh, the biggest event to hit the Middle East has taken place as of this week, and it has come through Turkey's announcement publicly this week that they are suspending all trade with Israel, all imports, all exports. Just keep in mind, Turkey historically, and even from a modern perspective, uh, that particular region, which originally encompassed the Byzantine Empire and prior to that, the Roman Empire, has been a central area of trade routes and routes of accumulation of wealth for millennia. So, this is a major blow to Israel's economy after what I reported last week in regards to Israel losing $2.6 billion monthly from boats there and ships they're not taking in at their southern port of Eilat. So that particular action, as I stated, will lead to significant economic pressures on Israel over time. And there are other things happening in relation to that that we'll cover later in the talking points. Moving on to some really interesting happenings in Japan. So there's a couple of things that happen vis-a-vis Japan here. Uh, First is, and this is somewhat unrelated, so I should probably mention it first, is that Russia has seized approximately 400 plus million. I think it was 400 million or 400. Yeah, I think it was $400 million, something like this, from J.P. Morgan Chase Bank, in response to the bill that was passed to seize Russian assets by the United States government. Now, that seizure has not yet taken place. And interestingly, the European Union is raising a huge stink over this because they know that once the dollar is weaponized in this way, Russia, China, and the East will simply start to engage in economic warfare with the entire West, and then the gloves will come off. So it appears that the adults in the room are trying to reduce the temperature. Whether or not they'll be successful remains to be seen. Back to Japan. Now, interestingly, Japan is having a tourism boom. Why? Well, because their currency fell off a cliff. That's why, Jason. Visitors to Japan this year, actually this month, hit a record high, while Japanese overseas travel remains below pre-2020 levels. So if you look at this in terms of millions, foreign visitors to Japan, if you wanted to roll that back to approximately, let's say 2008, it was about 750,000 people. And it's not entirely clear whether this is monthly or whether this is an aggregate number that's averaged. It's not clear in the chart. The source of it is the Japan National Tourism Organization. But the Japanese overseas travelers, in terms of people actually leaving to go elsewhere, is approximately a 50% retracement below pre-2020 levels. So that means that you've got this the same or higher foreign visitors to Japan, but people in Japan aren't leaving because they simply cannot afford to travel. And why is that? Well, Russia cut off their fuel supply. And the reason why they cut off their fuel supply is because of their support for Ukraine vis-a-vis the Ukraine war against Russia. And that created a huge problem for them. So the geopolitical issues that are taking shape as a result of this will result in significantly higher gold buying, and we may actually see some very significant price increases. In fact, price of gold hit an all-time high priced in yen. At one point, it was 350,000 yen, which I believe is a 6x move from its price in 2008. If my memory serves correct, I'll have to revisit the charts. But if you're a precious metals investor in Japan, it might be a good idea to get some more. So their economic policy is essentially turning Japan into a museum. It's too expensive for Japanese to leave. So Japan has been Greasified. So if you want to take a cheap vacation, go to Japan and maybe do them a solid and help them out with their economy if you can.
A buddy of mine just went over there.
Yeah, Japan's a great place. Definitely want to go to the Shinto shrines. It's on my life bucket list. Okay, so moving on to Ireland again. I covered Ireland and the Newtown Mount Kennedy situation last week. No, just as a reminder to the audience, Newtown Mount Kennedy is a small village of approximately 3,000 individual people in County Wicklow, which is directly south of County Dublin on Ireland's eastern coastline. And County Wicklow is known for its mountains. It's known for its waterfalls and rivers, and it's also known for its being the home of Glendalough and many scenes where the film Braveheart was filmed. So it's a very picturesque, idyllic community. But this is unrelated to the protest actions that are happening in Ireland or Newtown Mount Kennedy or other places, other than the fact that there have been buses that have been seen around the country that are attempting to bring in unvetted, military-aged men to locations in the country secretly. And it's gotten to the point of where protesters are starting to follow these buses around to find out where they're going. So this is most certainly escalating. But the Irish Times Group, which is the owning conglomerate that owns the Irish Times newspaper, which is based out of Dublin. They acquired the online death notice platform RIP.IE. Now, RIP.IE was founded 19 years ago in 2005. And RIP.IE is Ireland's leading online platform for death notices with 60 million page views monthly. Think about what that means, ladies and gentlemen. Why is a newspaper acquiring a death notice platform? Well, it could have something to do with the inoculation propaganda. There appears to be, or at least based upon its face, an effort by establishment media institutions to acquire platforms that record deaths in an effort to cover them up. Um, there's no reason to even think that this is part of some sort of, like portfolio situation, especially considering how the Irish government is treating its own citizenry at this particular moment. So keep that in your head for the future, ladies and gentlemen. Moving on. Russia has announced that they have opened a criminal case against Volodymyr Zelensky, who is the current president of Ukraine. And he is under the wanted list. And I don't know which article of the criminal code it's under, but it appears that, at least publicly, there is an effort underway to prosecute Mr. Zelensky. That being the case, it's probably more likely that if he were to be prosecuted, it would be a result of the war ending and the government being captured or something of this nature. It's a high value target, obviously, for Russia in terms of extraction of intel. So, not that they would need it or not per se, but that case has been opened. So, I expect that there will be bounties offered for his capture. I have not seen them publicly, but Russia has utilized private military companies in the war theater, but ended that policy as a result of the Wagner fiasco that happened in 2023. Speaking of Ukraine, a recent order in Ukraine from its military has declared that the mentally ill and mentally retarded will be drafted into the armed forces of Ukraine. And this is from Ukraine's Ministry of Defense. They published an order with a list of diseases for which they will be considered fit for service. And these diseases include mental retardation, mental illness, patients with HIV, hepatitis, tuberculosis, and cancer. So this looks like a clear effort to simply genocide Ukraine's population by way of throwing them all at the front. There's no way that anybody with cancer or mental retardation or hepatitis or tuberculosis is fit for combat. They're simply throwing them into the breach. And that is the tragedy of what has happened in the modern Ukrainian state, ladies and gentlemen. That's where we are. Moving on to the campus stuff that we discussed last week and that I discussed last week. So, and this is in Rhode Island, and this is not the only university that's done this, but I'm not going to speak to all of them, just a few. So, Rhode Island, they have a prestigious university there, Ivy League school called Brown University, and Brown reached an agreement with their students that had established a Gaza Solidarity encampment, and their demands were to have full divestment from Israel and Israeli companies or any company that supplies any type of armament to Israel. And they have agreed to remove their encampment in exchange for divestment from Israel. So that means that Brown is either imminently going to divest or is going to hold meetings to discuss it with the board of trustees. So, according to this press release, it's a referendum that's going to happen, and it's a referendum on divesting from Israel, all Israeli institutions, state or public or private. Also, at Princeton University, students there gathered to initiate a hunger strike So students are starting to engage in hunger strikes. And another one at Goldsmiths University. Now, Goldsmiths University, I believe, I don't think that university is in the United States actually, but I'll have to double check this. But Gold for Palestine, which is a student led group, composed of students from Goldsmiths University. It's in London, UK. Yeah, it's in London, UK. And this is students and staff, and they're standing, of course, with another Gaza Solidarity encampment. And they succeeded in winning their demands to divest from Israel. So there are schools that are starting to divest, that are starting to pull their funding. And interestingly, unexpectedly, Israel, in response to Turkey's suspension of trade with them, has decided to sanction Turkey. So usually the escalation ladder with economic warfare starts with economic warfare, and then it moves into hot war. So, in my opinion, it's only a matter of time before Turkey enters the fray. But they have a bigger problem on their hands in northern Syria with rebels there and rebels in the north of Iraq that consistently harass Turkey's southern regions, or had up until recent years. Moving on to other areas of this conflict. As a result of the Israeli plans to start a Rafah operation in the south of the Gaza Strip, the Ansar Allah uh, movement, which is the dominant governmental authority in Yemen, has announced that they will target all Israeli bound ships in the Mediterranean Sea as of now. So, as we speak, every port in Israel, Ashdod, Haifa, and Eilat, are all under blockade. And the range of the Houthis' ballistic missiles extends from the central Mediterranean all the way into the Indian Ocean. So, this is going to have a pretty severe and swift impact, not just on, you know, certain citizens of Israel, whether they're Jewish or not, but the entire population. Uh, how this will impact other aspects is not clear. Um, how aid is going to come in is not clear, but it appears to me that the gloves are starting to come off a little bit more aggressively, and there will be casualties that one would expect to be friendly fire. Unfortunately, the escalation ladder is definitely kicking up big time. Moving on, a very tense moment happened in Niger this week, where Russian troops entered a base housing U.S. military, and they were ordered to withdraw by the Russians. So that grouping of military personnel entered an air base in Niger that is hosting U.S. troops, and this is according to a senior U.S. defense official that spoke to Reuters about it. And that move followed a decision by Niger's junta to expel U.S. forces from the country. Now, the military officers ruling this nation, which is in West Africa, have told the United States to withdraw its approximately 1,000 military personnel from the country, which until a coup last year had been a key partner for Washington's fight against insurgents who had killed thousands of people and displaced quite a few more, millions more actually. And a senior U.S. defense official speaking on condition of anonymity stated that Russian forces were not mingling with U.S. troops, but were using a separate hangar at Airbase 101, which is next to Diori Hamani International Airport in Niamey, which is Niger's capital. So it's not clear whether or not they've evacuated, but they do not appear to have come to blows. So that's good, at least. In terms of the student strike actions and things of this nature, um, the School of Visual Arts in New York City has a sit-in on its hands. So a group of pro-Palestine protesters are sitting and refusing to leave. It's not clear to me whether or not they've been cleared out or not, or whether or not it was organized with people in the venue or not. But they have 4 demands, and this is from the group Students for Justice in Palestine. The first demand is complete financial transparency and divestment from Israeli companies and weapons manufacturers. Public official statements from SVA and David Rhodes himself condemning the genocide in Gaza and the Israeli aggression, cutting ties with Hillel International and other Zionist institutions, and protecting student speech and organizing on campus. So they want to stop the wars and stop the assault on their freedom of speech. So that is ongoing. Moving on to more of the campus protests, there was a violent incursion on UCLA's campus in Los Angeles, California this week, where a large group of Israel supporting counter protesters, agitators, etc., were shown on film using wide varieties of weapons, including sticks, pepper spray, even fireworks. There was video footage of fireworks being fired upon the protesters, and the encampment was later violently cleared by police, along with these pro-Israel agitators. It's not entirely clear which side was able to start or not this particular fight. We have to be very cautious in terms of this rhetoric. But one of the protesters, who's Jewish, his name is Aidan Doyle, he described the injuries he sustained from the attack that he suffered, which included being hit with rocks, a hammer. He was even slashed with a knife. He was also pepper sprayed. And the police stood by looking on for 2 hours doing nothing. And something similar happened in Chicago. So if we remember the protests from 4 years ago with BLM, and that involved looting and burning large sections of major cities, there was something similar that happened there as well. So there appears to be some type of coordination happening, because with that type of violence, it's pretty clear that the police that were there didn't want to get hurt. They simply did not have the manpower to be able to deal with it. And as a result of the attacks, thousands upon thousands of people came to help protect the students. But the violence is definitely escalating there. Speaking of which, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Congresswoman, has publicly announced that she will force a vote to oust Speaker of the House Mike Johnson this coming week, after the passage of a bill banning, quote, anti-Semitism on college campuses, and adopting the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism as a result of that. And it also follows the actions of an executive order that was signed during the Trump administration that called for something similar. And that is expected to happen sometime early next week. Approximately 91 members of the House voted against this bill. But actually, there were more Democrats that voted against it than Republicans, which should be very telling. Moving on, the Israeli Minister of Economy and Industry, as it relates to these protests, his name is Nir Barkat, and Mr. Barkat stated, quote, So what does that mean if an American public opinion is an existential threat to Israel? What he's saying is that Americans that protest against Israel are an existential threat to them. And we know how Israel deals with what they refer to as existential threats. They deal with them very violently. And they consider any opposition to them to be, anti-Semitism, essentially, in terms of how their public statements are being delivered and subsequently interpreted. Now, this is my last talking point of the day. And this is a brief list of the historical, religious, and cultural heritage sites that have been destroyed in Gaza specifically. since October 7th, 2023. A total of 206 heritage sites have been damaged or destroyed in total. Of them, the following have been leveled completely: the ancient harbor of Anthedon, which is from the Mycenaean era; the archaeological site of the Byzantine church of Jabalia, which was built in 444 AD; the Great Omari Mosque, which was built in the 7th century AD; the Syed al-Hashim Mosque, which was built in the 12th century AD; Library of the Great Omari Mosque, which was opened in 1277. Now, keep in mind, this was only 100 years after roughly 100 years after the Battle of Hattin, which was the decisive victory of Salah ad-Din, also known as Saladin, over the Crusader army that created the Kingdom of Jerusalem. He drove them out of the Levant, and Byzantine Church of Jabalia was established. Not Jabalia, excuse me, but the Great Omari Mosque was established approximately 100 years later, slightly less. So, of course, that particular mosque is located not far away from where those battles took place during the Crusader years of the Third Crusade. Moving on, the Samaritan bathhouse, which was restored in 1320 by the Mamluk rulers. And the Mamluks were the rulers that, in that particular area, they preceded the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire took over that region in the early 16th century. And the Rafa Museum was also destroyed. It was built 2 years ago, completed 2 years ago. And the Carrara Museum, whose collection consisted of about 3,000 artifacts dating back to the Canaanites in the Bronze Age. So this by itself should have been protected under Article 1 of the 1954 Hague Convention, which has been signed by both Palestine and Israel. So this is going to be more evidence of the cultural erasure and heritage destruction that's taken place as a result of this war. It's commonly done in wars, sadly, but let history record what happens whenever people in power do not heed wise counsel. And with that, Jason, that concludes my talking points for today's episode. Back over to you for technical analysis, sir.
Thank you, as always, enlightening and fascinating, sir. We appreciate you sharing all that information with us every week. With that said, I'll jump back over into Bitcoin. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more right now. I did provide a macro analysis yesterday. I do suggest that if you're looking for a little larger picture, make sure that you're checking that out, because I do believe we're in a fairly decent spot based on what I'm seeing when I zoom out. When I take a look at the 1 hour candles here for Bitcoin, I'm seeing some consolidation, maybe even forming a bit of a cup and handle here. I was looking for a potential inverse head and shoulders here, but we did see a little bit more of a breakdown on that, so I'll go ahead and eliminate that idea for right now. Technically, we can still be in this falling broadening wedge and actually be seeing the breakout of that right now. So price action is kind of negotiating this point of control here around 63.9. There's some fairly key moving averages just above this level, especially on the daily. So there's key resistances around 65 to 66K. If we start seeing daily closure above that, I would expect new highs to be put in more than likely this month into next month. With that said, I want to take a look at the CME because it did close a little bit lower on the price action on the 4 hour than we're currently at right now. So if we take a look at where we pumped up to here recently, that was around 64.5 on spot. So if we're looking at futures, we may see a little bit of a gap down to start the week on Monday. So that's something to kind of be aware of. Something that I noticed as well, and if you have any insight on this, if you're watching, feel free to drop it in the comments or contact me on the side. But if we take a look at, say, the 4-hour time frame, you're seeing CME closed at 63,365. You take a look at the 12-hour, 63,365. Take a look at the 22-hour, 63,365. But if we flip over to the daily closed at 62,590. So I'm questioning if the gap down is to 62,590, more than likely, or where we would technically be seeing the gap at. So if anybody has any insight on that, feel free to let me know. Like I said, in the comments or on the side, DM me, or just ask in the Discord or whatever, wherever you feel comfortable. But I just found it a little bit odd that there was different closures on the hourly time frames versus the daily time frame. So something to keep in mind for CME. We might have a slight gap down if the price action doesn't come back to that area right now. Kind of flagging out on the 1 hour here, holding the 21 MA as support, but I'm not seeing these as really bullish candles. If we come down and just retest this spider line here, and retest that point of control that we're seeing here, there seems to be some volume confluence there. That I would say is fairly bullish. But you can break back down into this area and potentially create a bullish pattern. Maybe if we saw something like this. I don't know if I like that. So the scenario that I would want to stick to right now is the breakout of this falling broadening wedge. If we see a breakdown of this, you would need to hold at a double bottom here and come back up. Or if this breaks down, we're looking at new lows. Likely volume gap down to these areas where I was trading before. You've got this 200 daily moving average just below 50,000 and around 49,778. So there could be some support there. We haven't retested that for quite a while. So just something to keep on the radar. We'll flip over to Bitcoin dominance real quick. I did touch on this just slightly in the macro update. The Bitcoin dominance looks to be increasing on the daily. And the next leg up, to me, looks likely to maybe at least try to approach this green box. I know we've been looking at this territory for quite a while. I'm going to continue to extend that out. Okay. Something to keep in mind too. Let's zoom out just a little bit more. Yeah, that line doesn't quite line up there. It may just be the time frame that I had it drawn on. So if we take a look at this larger line, right? Wonder what time frame I was looking at there before. But if we take a look at that larger line, look at where that's retesting at. You got these wicks retesting that 21 MA and pretty much retesting this spider line here. So do we get a larger bounce for BTC dominance? Like, how high can the dominance go? Type of a thing. See what might be a little more likely here. Yeah, okay, so this is coming up to the bottom of the golden pocket. So that 60% figure, maybe I should bump that up just a little bit to the top of the golden pocket. Maybe 61% is possible. So I'm just going to extend that out there. And on this previous, area here, we were up at this 73% area. So that was in January of 21. at the last peak at 69K. So interesting to note, to be honest, because we're in that territory right now, sitting around what, 64, 63K, and we've been as high as 73K, and this dominance has not gotten nearly as high. So it tells you that people are holding some altcoins there. So the Bitcoin dominance, not what it once was, and honestly, I just would be really surprised to see it come back up here, and this would seem impossible to come back up to this 90% area. So just something to consider for dominance right now. And honestly, just looking at the 5-day stochastics, it may have topped out. We've got a bearish divergence here. You got a bearish divergence, and you got stochastics pointing down after a rejection at the 80 level. Didn't even make it into the overbought territory. So there's some bearish divergence on the stochastics there for you as well. So something to keep in mind there for the dominance, right? Move over to tether dominance. I did highlight briefly on the macro report that we did see a rejection at the 200 weekly. So we're on the 4-hour here for tether dominance. We're actually seeing some consolidation. The stochastics have kind of bottomed out. So we may see a little bit of a washout over the weekend where we come back up and retest these levels. If you see closures on the 4-hour above the 200 weekly and above the 200 daily, then you're looking at probably a much larger dump could take place. But until we see something like that, I wouldn't get too worried for the tether dominance. All right, let's move over to our total 3. I was looking at the weekly on the macro picture yesterday, something that I actually failed to highlight. We've got a nice hidden bullish divergence there. If we clean that up. Okay, so stochastics are kind of bottoming out. You got a long wick on a green weekly candle. It's getting ready to close tomorrow with a higher low printed with a bounce off the 21 MA. That looks bullish for altcoins to me. So we'll keep an eye on that. Let's zoom in a little bit and just take a look at the 4-hour. Getting topped out on the 4-hour here a little bit. I wouldn't see any glaring issue if we came back down and retested this level at the 21 MA. Sort of the breakout level of this formation here, whatever you want to call that. Had kind of a little inverse head and shoulders here to get all that started, but any retest of that 21 MA on the 4-hour is fine. Any breakdown of this level here would be really, really catastrophic. And I mean, even if that were to happen, you're talking about a 10+% dip for the altcoin market cap. I just honestly don't see it right now, but it doesn't always make itself apparent over the weekend because it is low volume, so things can get a little bit sketchy. But this 4-hour to me is a little bit cooked and probably needs to come back down and retest this point of control in 21 MA. As long as we see a clean bounce there, we should be good. But really the hope was that this was some type of a double bottom formation, which would have taken you back up above this 750, 760 billion level. But I'm not seeing the follow through right now, and the 4-hour stochastics are probably going to have to reset from what I'm looking at here. So we'll see what happens as the weekend follows through. Take a look here at ETH BTC. It's actually selling off pretty hard on the weekly. There has been some key action on the daily, and we're seeing a breakdown of that 21 MA here with a weak double top. Didn't even make it up to the 200 daily. So that's not the most bullish of price action for the ETH BTC pair for the short term. So we saw this tweezer bottom here, and then we came up and made this double top. So consolidation in this range would be more bullish for the pair than a breakdown of this level and a creation of a new low. Obviously, there is support here around this 0.0444 level. but it's not really what the Ethereum bulls are going to want to see. Would be a further breakdown of this pattern. So what you would really probably want would be to hold this divergence, maybe not even necessarily that larger line, but this line right here corresponding to this bullish divergence where we had this low in the price action, much lower low here, but a higher low on the RSI. So if we come down here, bounce off this line, and establish the 50 level on the RSI for the daily as support for the ETH BTC pair, then you'll see some bullishness come in. But for right now, this is resetting on the daily, and the stochastics are breaking down to the 50 level. RSI is breaking down to the 50 level. You got to find support at this divergence, or you're going to come down and reset further and potentially create a new low for that pair. Cover a few altcoins here real quickly. Actually, let's cover the DXY. Just want to see how that's moving right now before I jump over into the alts. That's still bottoming out on the 4-hour. So we'll look and see where this goes as things open up on Monday. So just keep that in mind. DXY has bottomed out and could see a little bit of a bounce, might see a little bit of a sell-off for risk on assets, and it is potentially even in a little bit of a bullish pattern, an ascending triangle, and you would have a target on that that's going to be technically much higher. You know, 108.79. Even something like that where it could bump you up to 110. So I would want to see a breakdown of this pattern, but it's kind of a bullish pattern, to be honest. So a few altcoins, BNB, third largest crypto by market cap, still consolidating here in this pennant. Price action right around the POC. Again, may have to retest the 21 MA, cooked on the 4-hour, very similar to Bitcoin. All right, if you kind of hold this up, could see something like this form. Okay, that would be bullish. That will get you out of this pattern. That will get you out of that pattern and essentially test the high of the previous part of the range around 640, 641. So I think that actually looks pretty good. Highlight that there. I did make a buy on Arrow. So Aerodrome Finance is available on Coinbase. You can buy this with fiat. This is backed by the Base ecosystem, high-speed layer 2. And I believe there's going to be a lot of money flowing through this as the bull run continues. So I'm essentially handcuffing this to my Coinbase stock that I'm holding. Right now we're seeing a breakout and retest this pattern, this inverse head and shoulders and point of control. I did make a buy around $1, reinforce with a larger buy actually around 120. If I see it dip back below $1, I'll go in much harder. I did miss this range. I literally was sleeping when this dipped this far. Moving over to Miria. 4-hour for Miria. I've been watching the consolidation on this. We had kind of a breakdown of what ended up being a bit of a bear flag. There's been a lot of these flags that have broken out in this run, but this one didn't. It saw a double rejection at the 200 daily, and now it dipped below this point of control. Has been consolidating, and now kind of hanging out there. 4-hour stochastics are cooked, kind of like we've been seeing on some of the other assets. But this potentially has a little more possibility for bullish consolidation in this pennant, as we are actually technically, now that I look at this, it's a pretty nice bullish divergence. You know, that's pretty strong. You did pretty low there on the RSI, but much higher on the price action with this wick down. So that's a nice divergence to take a look at. Break out of this POC and, you know, break out of the 200 daily and a retest of that. I think this thing's going to fly. But if you look at where this is at right now, if you're buying in this range, even if you get to this area, it's going to be a nice profit. It would be like a 33% profit if you see a breakout into that area. So you can look at potentially taking some off the table and, you know, looking for a retest if you see a breakout of that type of thing. But if we look at this on the daily, this is like a much larger bullish consolidation type of a pattern. I mean, you know, you could see breakdown of this. There's no doubt about that. You did see that rejection at the 200 daily. So, you know, you're looking at the next volume gap is just below the 0.5 retracement. That's at like 0.0043. Golden pocket, you've got a little bit of a high volume node there around 0.003. And then there's a lot of volume down here just above the 886. You know, that's at like 0.001.6, but the consolidation here is lending itself to some bullishness. If we look here, did we get the divergence on the daily too? Yeah, you've got the divergence on the daily too, so this may actually be pretty strong. Something to look at. This is a low cap coin. I think I've mentioned this before, but MEXC shows that it has the pair on TradingView, but then when I go into MEXC, I can't purchase it either on the app or on the exchange. It just does not have the pair. And there is actually an area where you can deposit the coin, but there's no trading pair. So I would have to purchase this on a swap. So I'm looking at potentially doing that. I did miss these wicks down, unfortunately, but I don't really mind on that. In the end, if this thing does a 50 or 100x, like people are saying it potentially might, it's not really going to matter if you buy a 0.005 or 0.006 or 0.007. Anything in that range is going to make you a pretty good bag. So we won't worry about that too much, but it does seem to be ranging right now, and this could potentially be a big altcoin going into next year in terms of its gains. So just something to keep on your radar. I'll leave you with that. We'll jump back into Bitcoin real quick just to see what the hourly's giving us. So we're still just kind of seeing this consolidation above the 21 MA, but kind of a red candle coming in, kind of losing the RSI and maybe even a bit of a rejection on the stochastics here in this oversold territory, which is not a bullish sign. This 15-minute looks like it wants to break down. You're losing the 50 level on the RSI on this 15 minutes. So essentially you got to get back above this 21 MA, which is 63.8K. Or we may see a little bit more of a down move. And like, let's just say, for shits and giggles here, we get some type of a retracement, break down back into this pattern. Golden pocket sitting here at around 59.4 to 59,650. So that could be an area that you could look to accumulate if we see a breakdown there. Again, you know, if you're like trading or whatever, you would probably want to put your stop somewhere around this level. 57.4, 57.2, maybe even below these wicks here, depending on how much you're willing to gain or lose. But it's just, this is chop, man. This is such chop. Like, you've got this hidden bullish, you came up, you got rejected, you know, you're coming down, you're testing the 50 level on the RSI again, like I said, and you're testing the 21 MA on the 15 minutes. So this is kind of a bearish candle print here, in my opinion, and likely would mean a little bit of retracement. Again, if we hold this spider line, that's very bullish. Further retracement is fine, but you're going to want to hold this golden pocket, or at the very worst double bottom again at 57. Otherwise, we're going to see significant move down. I don't think this region in here is going to hold us up. There's maybe some support in this area around 53 to 54, but I don't think it's significant. You're looking at 52.7 down to 50, 49, 48 and a half. So look out for those levels. There's strong support at 48 and a half, and that goes back to the formation. I talked about this on the macro report. That goes back to the formation that was created not at this 50k level. There is some support there, though. You can see this volume node around 51.8, but there's a lot more volume down here because this is where the ETF came in between 40 and 48. So strong support between those levels if we do break down, but I don't see any justification for that right now, as long as we see some consolidation come in that has some bullish tones like I just highlighted. So sorry if that's a little busy down there. This was all trading and chop zone for me. So with that in mind, I think we're looking pretty decent. Probably hold this level, see some consolidation through the weekend for BTC. Hopefully the oscillators reset going into the start of the markets Monday and into Tuesday, and we see a nice pump. I did highlight the fact that we could see even, triple digit BTC 90 to 100K by July. So that is entirely possible. All right. That would have happened on this pattern here that I was kind of highlighting, this bars pattern. So that's the timeline there. You could see 100K by July if we see the follow through on what we're seeing right now. But if we see rejection, even if we come up to the top of this pattern, get rejected and fall out of it again and make a new low, we're going to be in for a long summer. So those are the two scenarios on our plate. And honestly, there may even be a third scenario where we could just continue to grind sideways in this range. This could become a little more of a falling channel with a little more of a bullish bias, and we could just stay in here for a long, long time. Long, long time. Could take us all the way in through, June into July, and then we may see an impulsive move at some point. There may be some type of catalyst or whatever else, but for right now, we're still consolidating in this range, folks. But we are potentially seeing a breakout. So let's keep our eyes on it. With all that said, I am your host with the honks, Jason Bruce. I am going to get honking on out of here. If you made it this far, please honk the like button on your way out, folks. If you're not subscribed to the channel and you enjoyed this podcast, make sure that you get subscribed and hit the bell for notifications, and that way you'll get a ding when we send these out to you in the future. So I appreciate you all. Take care. Much love. God bless. And we'll see you soon.